Good backdrop, very active. All right. Well, I've already given a few introductory comments on why we're here today, so shall we just get straight into it?
Prime Minister, will someone take responsibility for the MSD error which led to the Auckland lockdown?
I'm going to hand over to Minister Hipkins because, of course, he holds a bit of history and knowledge on this one.
I think it's a matter of record at the time that a clerical error was admitted at the time. We have to consider the whole context of this particular case, which was that we had COVID-19 in Northland. And so the decisions that we took around the Northland lockdown were to protect Northlanders. Very low vaccination rates back at that time. Delta was not circulating widely within the New Zealand community outside of Auckland. And so our first and foremost priority at that time was to protect the people of Northland as much as we could.
But will you apologise to the women accusing them of using false information to travel across the border?
I think, I don't want to get into all of the ins and outs of that at the time. We were making decisions based on the information that we had available. I was very, very clear in all of my comments at the time that much of the information that we had was not fully confirmed. But ultimately, the decision that we took is not one that we would change now. It was to do with protecting Northland in an environment where vaccination rates were low and where we knew COVID-19 and Delta in particular was making its way up there.
When did you know about the MSD error?
It was as the investigation, if you like, continued to unfold. And we did make it clear at the time that there had been a clerical error in there as well.
So why did, since finding out that there was an error there, any reason for not bringing that to light?
There's nothing new in the report as I've read it today. All of this was a matter of public record at the time.
Do you remember when you made that public?
When we found out, yeah.
Those women received quite a lot of backlash. Do you think they deserve an apology?
Well, I think when you go back and you look at everything that we were saying at the time, there were some unsubstantiated allegations being made against them at the time, which we were pushing back on and asking people not to make judgments based on the fact that we didn't have accurate information. And I think it reinforces the overall view that we took at the time, that actually we shared information as much as we could so that people were informed about the decisions we were making. But judgments and some of the commentary was not particularly helpful.
To clarify, will apologise to the women?
Look, we'll continue to, I'll go back again and have another look at the information at the time, but this was all made public at the time.
Will you apologise to the people of Northland for the error which caused the lockdown?
Like I said, there was COVID-19 in the community in Northland. That was the cause of the lockdown. And so that was our approach at that time. It was the right approach at that time in the context of relatively low vaccination rates and the need to keep everyone protected while we got those vaccination rates up.
Minister, have you seen the National NCEA literacy results?
Please, just...
Sorry, the
Have you seen the
NCEA.
National NCEA literacy results?
which ones are you talking about?
The trial.
Oh, the trial? Yes, indeed I have, yes.
Are you concerned about plummeting results?
Well, this is the trial is, these are new standards that are just being put together and they're being trialled for the first time. One of the reasons that you trial things like this is to make sure that you're getting the standards set at the right level. We have separated out literacy and numeracy and made them a specific separate requirement in order to gain NCEA because we were concerned that young people were leaving school without having adequate levels of literacy and numeracy.
And why do you reckon we don't have adequate results?
Oh, this has been a long-standing challenge in New Zealand's education system. We've seen our levels of literacy and numeracy on the decline for about 20 years or more. This is something that I think successive governments have been grappling with. We're putting a lot more resource into making sure that we're improving the teaching of literacy and numeracy. And the new NCEA co-requisite standards around literacy and numeracy are designed to capture that learning and to make sure that we do have kids leaving school with the sort of levels of literacy and numeracy they need to be able to thrive in further study and in the workforce.
Minister, are you concerned about the low pass rates for literacy and numeracy?
Yes, I am.
Tēnā koutou i ngā rangatira o te mutu. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Kaupapa o te rānei.
Mm.
Can you
Kia ora.
give us any stats about Māori Pacifica involved in the apprenticeship program?
We know from the apprenticeship boost, 18% from memory?
19%
19%.
Māori.
We know from the apprenticeship boost that 19% of those who have been supported through this program have been Māori. and we know that roughly about 8% are Pacifica youth. We've had a particular focus on making sure that with our apprenticeship programs that we are seeing an increase in Māori and Pacifica youth taking them up, and that's why we also have the Māori Trades Training Scheme as well.
Are there any incentives to keep our Māori Pacifica here in Aotearoa rather than going off overseas for a better paying job?
We know that those jobs that apprenticeships lead to are often well-paying, high-quality jobs that have real certainty with them. We have massive infrastructure gaps in New Zealand. We need more housing. And the number of the apprenticeship programs I've visited have had good numbers of Māori and Pacific youth engaged in them, I think because they are well-paying and they do have excellent prospects. One of the things we need to do, though, is keep working with employers to make sure we are seeing that diversity of take-up for our young people. Here at Fulton Hogan, you hear that they've got very high rates of Māori and Pacific and diversity within their apprenticeship programs, and that in part will be because of how they're partnering to find the young people they're working with.
How are employers being more culturally aware with Māori Pacifica specifically?
I think it's, it will differ in different environments, and I'll have the Minister for Social Development and perhaps even the Minister for Youth might to comment on this as well. My observation is that we see our employers being much more aware of the communities that they're working in. So building relationships, for instance, with their local schools, with iwi, with community organisations, and in building that awareness, seeing that their future workforce is in their community. And what can they do to make their workplace more attractive to their community? And I see examples throughout Auckland. Auckland Airport is a good example. Healthcare in South Auckland is a good example. This is where we're building this awareness that our young Māori and Pacific populations are growing, and that is where our future is. So let's make sure that we're employing them in those jobs of the future.
What trade would you do?
What trade would I do? One of my favourite classes in high school was what they would call now probably Metal Tech. If I had another my time again, I would have learned that for longer, because still one of my greatest achievements at high school was as a 14-year-old topping my metalwork class. All right, Minister Poloni, do you want to say anything more on that?
I'll just quickly add. Or do you want to? You go for it.
Yeah, go for it.
So I just had a chat with, for example, someone from Fulton Hogan around the diversity here. About 39 different ethnicities represented across their workforce, including many from different Pacific communities as well. And one of the things they said that I found really interesting was, ensuring, for example, that they supported the Tongan relief back when things happened. We know that when things happen back in home countries, it affects communities here as well. So getting in behind and supporting their communities. And for more diverse communities, having things like prayer rooms. And I know they're also working with Diversity Works on a journey to ensure that they're able to both attract but retain people from different communities as well. So just a shout out for that as well. Great work.
What are you doing to get women in the trades?
Which of it? Because actually all the portfolios here, you can see with the apprenticeship boost, and actually across the board with our apprenticeship programs, we are seeing an increase in young women and women taking up apprenticeship opportunities. A bit of it's on us to make sure we're working with the industry training organisations to recruit, but it's also about those workforces and employers making sure it's an attractive place for people to work. You don't want to be what you can't see. So the more that we have women in the trades being profiled and talking about what they're doing and what a great career it is, the more likely it is that we'll attract young women to those roles.
Prime Minister,
Yeah.
what are the long-term impacts for children growing up in motels?
Oh, ultimately, we don't want young people and children growing up in motels, but we equally don't want them to be without shelter. Our long-term plan is to get them into sustainable, long-term, safe housing. It's why, for instance, we've worked so hard to now have built 10% of all the state houses in New Zealand have been built by this government.
Could the government be doing more to get people out of motels?
Our goal is to get people out of motels. Our goal is also to make sure that they are safe and sheltered. Motels are intended to only be a transition. The long-term goal is to have enough housing so that no New Zealander is in that form of transitional housing for more than a short time.
So could the government be doing more to get them out?
Yeah, and this is where every part of what we're doing, even here today, talking about apprenticeships, which we've increased by over 50% since we came in government, is all about having the ability to build more houses. We've built more than any government since the 1970s, but we need to build more.
Victoria University is
Okay, well...
staff and students last week. Do you think these relationships are appropriate and should all unis follow suit?
That's ultimately a matter for the universities. They have institutional autonomy around how they approach that. I think the policy that Victoria University has set out, though, is a very sensible one.
And then we'll make this last
Okay,
one.
sure, yeah.
So, yeah, do you have any comment around what happened there? Or?
There was a human error, and that was acknowledged at the time, so I'm not really sure beyond what Minister Hipkins has already said if there's much more to add to.
The same view in how it was handled?
There was a lot going on. There was more than just that one human error. There was a lot going on in terms of the context of COVID at that time, and all of those things combined is what led to the decision-making then, and so I don't think there's much more to add to what Minister Hipkins has already said.
Okay.
One from police.
Yeah, sure.
And we'll make this the last one.
Yeah, promise.
A real potpourri today. Minister Hipkins, go for it.
Just a quick question on the pursuit policy. Are we going to hear anything more about that, or when we can expect it to be released?
The Commissioner of Police has been actively reviewing the pursuits policy. Ultimately, it's an operational set of decisions. This isn't about law change. Ultimately, this is about how the police choose to implement the law. They have been reviewing that. I do understand from what they've said to me so far that they are going to make some changes to their pursuits policy and that there will be more instances where they continue with a pursuit. But ultimately, the details of that will be with the Commissioner. I don't think it's much further away, but ultimately that's not my decision. That's an operational one for the Commissioner.
Thanks, everyone.
One last question.
Oh, sorry, I was calling time. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.